To the Blessed One, the Lord who fully attained perfect enlightenment, to the teaching which he expounded so well, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, to these the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, we render with offerings our rightful homage. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, still had compassion for later generations. May these simple offerings be accepted for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sangham saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranang gacchami. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kame Sumi Chachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Sura Merya Majjapamadhatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani Panchas Sikkhapadani Silena Sugatim Yanti Silena Bhoga Sampada Silena Nibuting Yanti Tasma Silang Visodaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So in case anyone is new and familiar with our evening, then I'll be leading the meditation for about 40 minutes. Then we'll have a period of perhaps a short reflection, followed by questions and answers. And if you could put your questions into chat, I would appreciate it. That would work well for me. So, this is our opportunity to practice a formal sitting practice. We call it a formal sitting practice because we practice all the time. We don't begin and end with sitting. Yet there is a sitting practice. Sitting is a very conducive posture to practice meditation. So taking a seat, either through sitting on a cushion on the floor or by sitting on a chair, whichever's most suitable for you. And our object is to find or establish an upright posture. And although we talk in terms of, to say that's our objective, but it's the natural posture of the body to be upright. There shouldn't be an effort involved to do that, although the reason is there is an effort is because of our bad posture. We perhaps have a slumped posture, leaning forward, not holding the body erect. It's a bad posture. So what we're doing is returning to a natural, upright, but relaxed posture. Because the upright posture is the posture of awakened awareness. If you look at the statues of the Buddha, you'll notice that the Buddha's always assuming an upright posture, and that's a symbol of awakened awareness. And it's also a guide to us to sense, oh yes, that's how to sit. Except that we're not sitting in a rigid way like a statue, but in an upright but relaxed way. We have to discover this for ourselves. How can that be? How can we establish that upright posture in a relaxed and natural way? I can give suggestions, and the disadvantage of that is that we can take them as instructions and something I have to do. I have to do this. I have to try and get it right. Rather than the practice is to discover it for yourself. So the practice of self-discovery. Finding the body's natural upright posture. So I can make the suggestion to lean forward and back, because that's a way of locating the muscles at the base of the spine that support the back. I can suggest that you make sure that the shoulders are relaxed, because we can hold a lot of tension there. And we might have to deliberately relax the shoulders to overcome the habit of being tense in that area. It's helpful to take a few deep breaths. On the out breath, deliberately letting go of the accumulated tension in the body. Simply letting it go can help by if you taking a few deep breaths. Bringing your attention into the breathing by making the breath deliberate, it's easier to bring the attention to it. But actually, a way of practice is not to interfere with the breath. So after taking a few deep breaths, then we don't continue to interfere with the breath. Let the breath be natural. Why is the breath a useful object for meditation? I think it's because it happens anyway. We don't have to make it happen. We don't need to do breathing. It's something we can simply observe. So in the same way as we don't need to do breathing, we don't need to do observation either. There's nothing we need to do, because it's a natural experience of life, of living, is the breath, to breathe. So the path of not doing, not interfering, simply observing. So we can apply that to the breath. We don't need to do the breathing. We don't need to do the observation of it, but simply notice. So in that way, we can apply that to everything. Whatever mental state arises, whatever sense of experience, in whatever sense that arises in, there's nothing we need to do to notice it. It happens anyway. We're not judging. We're not saying it should be this way or shouldn't be this way. And even though we're not doing observation, it's possible to sustain our awareness, because awareness is a natural human experience. It's perfectly normal to be aware. Simply being present into the experience as it is. The breath happens anyway. So does mental activity. Sounds, even images that come up behind the eyes when they're closed. So there's nothing that we can experience that's not a suitable object for meditation, for mindfulness. Even the grasping mind can be known in the present moment. Push and pull, the compulsive, habitual ways of grasping the future and the past are known in the present. So when we notice the mind being pulled and pushed, that's here and now, isn't it? Even though there's the desire to follow into what's next, Knowing that is in now, the present moment. It's an experience of now. In fact, in the grasping mind, there's no truth there, nothing that you can trust. But in the knowing of it, that's where truth lies. We can always trust that knowing of the present moment. So we're continually coming back into the present moment, into the way things are. We're not making it up, whatever it is. We don't need to make it up. What I mean is, we don't need to try to make sense of it. To be present is enough. When we're truly present, the truth is revealed to us. We don't need to make sense of it. The truth comes to us. Realization, it's called insight. That insight is simply seeing clearly. A seeing that happens when there's no delusion there. If we have some preconception as to what that is, then it just gets in the way. Simply let it go. If we think that we know, then we're not going to learn anymore. Just keep on investigating. Are you sure? No, you're never sure. Just keep your mind open and curious to the experience of being present. If your mind's very busy, it can be helpful to recognize that just as a deliberate sense of naming it. That's the busy mind. It can be helpful. Give us a perspective on our experience. Brings us out of the content of the mind into the knowing of it. Just in general terms, it's the busy mind. Perhaps it's restlessness or sleepiness, doubt, these hindrances, or maybe emotional states that you can recognize and just name. By naming them, it's a helpful way to step back from the content that's causing the emotion to arise. Oh, that's what it is. And then let go of the label and deliberately notice the experience as it really is, not formed as a label that we can believe in and lock it away, throw it away, think that we know and understand. So labels don't give us understanding. They give a perspective, but not true understanding. So what's it really feel like? What's that emotion like? What's the quality, the nature of it? When we find it ceases in its own time, we'll know that that's what happens. That's natural experience. That emotional states come to an end. They can't last. Whether we want them to last or don't want them to last. What we do is we let them run their course. That's how we learn from them, that they will cease in their own time. And we're not fueling them with the stories that cause them to arise, but simply noticing the experience of the emotion. And perhaps you experience a lot of physical restlessness or tension. And it's okay just to notice where that is, where it's felt. Giving permission for the tension to dissipate. It's okay to say to yourself, relax, to let it go. Ding. Ding. Wonder, maybe you could remove the screen? So, I'll say a few things about surrendering our preconceptions. Preconceptions, that you could call, that's the conditioned mind, isn't it? We preconceive things. We conceive things according to a position that we feel we hold, perhaps. We do this in many ways, and let's say an example is that the countryside, the English countryside should look like this. And we have that's a preconception, isn't it? That it should look like this. And when it doesn't look like this, then it's something wrong. So it should be, oh no, those fields aren't big enough, or no, it shouldn't be arable, it should be pasture. Or there should be more trees, or not, than there's too many trees. The countryside should look like this. That's a preconception. Well, of course, we hold the same views with regards to people. People should behave like this. Buddhists should be like this. All Buddhists should behave in this way. They shouldn't do that. That's not the way a Buddhist should behave. Or that they should think like this. So that's meet somebody, we hear that they're a Buddhist, so we have a preconception of who they are. So surrendering our preconceptions is to let that go, isn't it? To be willing to open up to possibility. The possibilities are endless. The possibilities that the countryside should look like this can, of course, ultimately the countryside can look how it is in its uninterfered state. It would be however it naturally is, wouldn't it? There'd be, if it's a naturally wooded, suitable for woodland, then there would be woodland, and that would be its natural state. So when we have a preconception about the English countryside, it should be fields and cows or sheep or whatever, then of course that is just it's not its natural state. The natural state of the countryside would be woodland. Well, you might wonder, what's this got to do with Buddhism? Well, we could apply this to the mind, couldn't we? We could say, so the mind should be like this. It should be this way. And we can be quite fearful of the natural state, because of our preconception that it should be like this. That if we didn't control the mind to make it like this, then anything could happen. It would be out of control, shock horror. And that's terrifying. That we can be very frightened by that. So we could set all sorts of targets to control the mind. I should be able to count my breaths, or I should be able to focus for this period of time, or I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't experience these unwholesome states of mind. And these are all preconceptions. But the natural state of mind is, perhaps terrifying. So what would it be like if we just let it go? Totally out of control. Be all over the place. And we can put a lot of effort into our practice, trying to get this and trying to get that based on our preconceptions of whatever it should be, however it should be, whatever these outcomes are that we imagine. Can make our practice into a lot of effort, a lot of hard work, trying to get this and get rid of that. Or judging ourselves for not being good enough. We've been practicing for so many years, and for whatever, or based on whatever criteria we choose, we're not getting anywhere. We're not achieving whatever it was, or whatever our preconception is of wherever we should be. We're not meeting that objective, that goal. It's all based on the preconception, isn't it? So is it possible that surrendering to our preconceptions is that actually this is the practice? Because the present moment experience is like this, isn't it? Mindfulness is like, it's just this. It's not something you can preconceive. You can't say how it is, how it's going to be. say next. It's whatever it is, isn't it? The truth is in whatever it is. It's not in our preconception of how it ought to be. So perhaps the practice is about surrendering our preconceptions, surrendering to the way it is. We might think this is going to be terrible then, if I have to just surrender to the way it is, lose control. I'll lose control. I won't. It'll be terrible. But actually, it's terrible now. This idea of being in control is fine, and losing control would be terrible. It's based on the idea that everything's fine when we're in control, but actually it's not the case, is it? When this there's a huge amount of effort involved in holding it all together. If your idea of maybe concentration, achieving some sort of level of concentration, is being in control and this is your goal, then there's a lot of effort involved in that. And maybe you have to get special conditions where that can happen. And then you have to sustain that somehow. And eventually it will fall apart. So there's a lot of suffering involved in that, trying to sustain these states of, in a sense, artificially sustained states of mind. Based on some sort of goal, achievement, a sense of a goal and achievement, trying to attain something. Of course, it can't be sustained. And so when it's inevitable that we'll end up with dukkha. It can't be any other way, can it? If we're practicing out of the grasping mind, then the result's going to be suffering. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to suggest that this isn't working. If this is your practice, then by investigating, looking at the evidence of the outcomes, then it might not be unreasonable to suggest this might not be working. I don't want to judge anybody here, I'm not trying to be critical, but just looking at the evidence. We look at the evidence of trying to make things work, setting targets is inevitably we're going to fail. Trying to control, sooner or later it's going to fall apart. If our practice is based on that, it's inevitably going to fail. We're going to end up in tears in the end. We're going to sooner or later we're going to think this isn't working. Is it just possible that surrendering our preconceptions might be the answer? Just to let go of these ways of thinking. If we imagine that whatever we can imagine the goal to be, whatever we can imagine the practice to be, it creates a preconception of something desirable that we have to try to attain. It becomes a doing activity, trying to get something. So we're practicing out of the grasping. We're practicing with craving. We're not letting go of the grasping mind. That's what the Buddha taught us to do. He said that grasping, craving, tanha, leads to suffering, dukkha. The second noble truth is the cause of the first. If you're trapped in this attitude, if you bring it to your practice, then you're just bringing dukkha into your practice. We're not freeing ourselves from dukkha. So is it just possible that surrendering our preconceptions might be a way forward? Surrendering to our preconceptions of how things should be, to simply be present with the way things are. Is that a possible way to practice? How would that be? And the frightening thing, what's causing this fear? Because it's really worth investigating. What is it that makes us frightened of the natural state? That's incredible, isn't it? Why would we be frightened of just letting go? What makes us want to hold on? What makes us want to let go under conditions? I'll let go as long as I don't have to let go of everything, Why would we make that conditional when it's so clear that that's the end of suffering? What's wrong with the natural state? If you let the countryside go wild, it goes into its natural state. We call it going wild. It finds its natural state. When we set it free, if you like, we stop interfering. So what if we were to stop interfering? Just let things be and know them as they are. How would that be? Is that possible? And if it's possible, where would it lead? What's wrong with the natural state of the countryside being wooded? Why would it be, would still be the countryside? It would just be in its natural state. So what would be wrong with the mind in its natural state? How could it be wrong? Wouldn't that be enlightenment? Then there's be no need to interfere, would there? It would be just fine, at ease, because there's nothing to do. So in that, if, then that enlightenment might be the natural state of the mind, then it's possible that maybe surrendering our preconceptions is a clue, sort of something worth exploring. What on earth is that? What is it? Would it be like to surrender my preconceptions of how to practice, how to meditate, how to be present? So we talk about the beginner's mind. That's a good, somewhat saying the same thing, isn't it? That the beginner's mind is somebody to practice without preconception. Because a beginner doesn't know anything. they're willing to learn. When we think we know something, then we stop learning. So a mind that it's not attached to preconception would be open and willing to learn. Willing to listen. And listening is listen to others, but also to listen to that inner dialogue, our own inner voice. What's that got to teach us? Willing to learn, not to judge and criticize, but to investigate without this preconception of how it should be. Like the idea of the Buddha's teachings of anicca, dukkha, anatta. Well, if you take anatta, not self, then if we conceive, whatever we conceive as to be not this teaching to mean, not self, gets in the way. It's an experience, isn't it? The three characteristics are to be experienced and not impermanence, seeing impermanence, and dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. These are to be experienced. They're not to be, if we hold them as a preconception, if we think we know, then we don't listen, we don't learn, we don't open the heart. So then that creates a lot of problems. We think we know what the Buddha meant by not self-wikifit. We hold, as soon as we create some sort of idea about what that is, we create a kind of self. You know, it's a view, kind of create a self-view. But it's about letting go of self-view. The Buddha's teaching isn't to form a view about self, an opinion, but it's to let it go. So by a preconception of what that means, this not self-teaching, whatever preconception we have is a view that will get in the way. It's an investigation, a continual opening to bring up the sense of self and investigate it without preconception. What's that? What's this? How's that? How can I open up and allow that to be? It's not about getting rid of anything, but being completely at ease. To let the mind find its natural state, where there's no resistance. We're not going to create a problem out of anything then, are we? And so then there won't be any suffering there. I'm feeling like it's a good time to ask questions. I hope that you've got some questions that you can put into chat. Some, whether it's related or not related to surrendering your preconceptions, I don't mind. Even a statement like, none of this makes any sense. If you don't ask me any questions, I'll just have to carry on. So thank you. Somebody's asked me a question. Is it the case that through meditation alone we can eliminate all our preconceptions, or that they fall away naturally at a certain time. Well, I think that when we realize what meditation is, it's not something that's separate from everyday life. I mean, life becomes a meditation practice. There's no separation. Intensive, let's say, formal sitting is a wonderful opportunity to deepen our insight. I really find that useful. I love meditating in the mornings, and what, investigating. So if I see, I'm really interested, curious, that's what meditation is, that state of curiosity. And so when we investigate that, using that curious mind, then naturally, yes, our preconceptions will naturally fall away at a certain time. It's a gradual path. So there is no specific time. It's an unconditional thing. If we practice unconditionally, then time doesn't come into play, in a sense. Because if we condition, time is conditioned, isn't it? If we have a time-bound way of thinking, at a certain time this will happen, then that's interfering with the natural process. We don't need to do that. We just practice just now, to whatever extent we can, just to reflect. So I'm really interested to investigate ideas and wherever they come from. And so this is funny, I got this from a book I was reading a book about the countryside called Wilding, and it just had this phrase in it. It talked about surrendering our preconceptions about the countryside, because it's about wilding. So it was talking about this. Well, what if you didn't have a preconception about what the countryside should look like and didn't interfere with it? Then it would revert to its natural state. And so I just saw those words, and I thought, that's just sums up that, or to investigate that summed up practice. It seems like, yes, our practice is about surrendering preconceptions. It's the meditation practice. How interesting. And that's what happens, I think, when you bring meditation into your life, if you like, or when the practice, and you'll find it everywhere. You learn from everything. So there's no boundaries. Somebody said, thank you for your reflections. Could you say something more about right view? Yes, right view is, there's so many things you can say about right view. Because of the Buddha has these wonderful formulas and lists, and so it's a good example of preconception, isn't it? Right view, there it falls in the Eightfold Path. It's often the first in the list. Right view, samadhi, and by already, once we, this wonderful way of analytical analytical approach can form a preconception. Oh, it's this, you start to pigeonhole it and stick it in a box, which it's really useful, but it's also quite an obstacle. So what can you say about right view? One thing you can say about right view is like that you could say it's no view at all. You could say the right view is to let go of views. So in a sense, that all views are wrong. Therefore, how can there be a right view? If it's a view and an opinion, then you need to let it go. So whatever view we have about right view is a view that we can let go of. It can't be right. Yet there are certain things that are wrong views, and we can let them go. So it would be a wrong view to hold a view like there is no result of action. Actions bear no results. That would be wrong view, and so let it go. But the right view is letting go of views, to see that we don't need to hold a position, that we don't need to take a position, but be present, awake and aware to notice the way things are. That doesn't take a view, does it? We don't need to have a view about it to know it as it is. So I would say that's one way of looking at right view, that it's not a view at all. You can call it right seeing, and there's a different way, using a different word. It's like different perspective, right insight. You could perhaps put it that way. Right seeing things clearly. Of course, it informs everything else. If we see things clearly, you could say in accordance with Dhamma, if you like, that informs everything else. So it means we have, right intention becomes possible. It's natural to think in the right way, to have the right attitude towards things. It follows naturally from seeing clearly. That's right speech becomes possible because we know when we're lying. We know the difference between, if you don't know the difference between, if you don't really know when you're speaking untruthfully, if you don't know that, then you can't not do it. So it takes something to be able to see that when, to be honest, to be truly honest it is impossible without seeing clearly. Take any other aspect of the Eightfold Path. Right view informs it. It's what makes it right. So the rightness of all of the of right speech, right action, right livelihood, the rightness of right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. It's the rightness comes about from right view, from seeing things clearly. So, but it doesn't mean that we can't do anything until we see things clearly, because all of the other factors of the Eightfold Path support right view, right seeing, through developing all these other aspects. They support our practice so that our clarity, the mind becomes clearer, sees more clearly. And so it's a continually self-supporting mechanism, continually developing our practice through each factor supporting the others. I hope I haven't missed anyone else's questions. I feel like, have I got, yeah? No. They haven't come through. If you had any. Would anyone like to unmute and ask any questions? I think it's one of the most difficult things that for people to do, this letting go, so losing control, isn't it? Letting go is losing control. A willingness to let go is a willingness to lose control. And that's very frightening, depending on how much you feel that you have to control things, to hold things together. But of course, it's the only way. You can't. You know, it's got to be that direction. We have to be willing to let go of these things, of the tension that we hold by trying to keep everything under control is enormous. That's what we call stress. That's why dukkha is sometimes translated as stress. So the stress of holding everything together is enormous. Even the stress of trying to do good, trying to be a good person, is incredibly hard. It's incredibly stressful. Trying to live up to the person we think we ought to be. Even though it's a good aspiration to be good, it's an incredible source of stress. You know, when we trying to be good or trying to be liked, how much energy and effort do we put in trying to be liked, wanting to be liked? Trying not to upset other people so they don't, so that they like us. It seems like a good thing to try not to upset other people, but when we look and investigate where that's coming from, we see, actually, you know, there's a lot of stress there, and it's dukkha. That word for stress isn't just another word for dukkha. And so, how could it be? There's only one way out. We have to let go. What would we be letting go of in order not to be so anxious about being liked? What would that be? What would we be letting go of? So whatever we can create worry and anxiety out of if we investigate it, we'll find that there's something that we're attached to. And so if we're attached, we know we can let go. That's the indicator. Wherever we find attachment, we know that letting go is possible. That's there. Then discovering what we're attached to is the first step, and letting go is the next. And that's where we find freedom. So it's a continual process of not to run away from out of fear, but to move towards. So in a sense, if we have to have it under control, then it's an indicator that we're attached to something. So what are we attached to? Then then we can let it go. Because when we make that clear, when that's clear, then we know letting go is possible. We know we can let go. So perhaps bringing our attention, investigation into what we're attached to will help us know what we need to let go of. And we'll know, won't we, when we've let go, because we'll experience that sense of laying down the burden. If it doesn't feel like that, then we haven't really let go. We've suppressed something. It's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking letting go is getting rid of. So it's not getting rid of, it's accepting. It's allowing things to be as they are. It's a path of non-interference. It's a path of allowing the mind to fall into its natural state. The natural state of the mind is not one of sort of unwholesome. It's not unwholesome. This is the amazing thing. And it's a truth a Buddhist truth, if you like. I don't know if it's unique to Buddhism, that the natural state of the mind is radiant. That's the natural state of the mind. We talk about to do good, avoid evil, and purify the mind, but actually the natural state of the mind is to be pure. It's already its natural state. That's the principle of Buddhism. That's why our practice can be based on being rather than doing. We don't have to do anything in a sense. We just have to let go of. We don't have to become wise. We just let go of delusion. It's like that. So let's finish with a closing homage. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Thank you everyone for coming this evening. Hope to see you again another time.